Welcome to Camp Azraq, the most recently constructed Syrian refugee camp in Jordan's northern Azraq Governorate. Unlike many refugee camps that came before it that were planned in a matter of days, Camp Azraq was planned and constructed over the course of several months, allegedly taking into consideration spatial and procedural lessons from its predecessors in neighboring regions. The Jordanian government and Western media herald the place as safer, structurally superior, more orderly, and more community-oriented. These improvements in the camp layout mark a shift in how humanitarians and the international community conceive and deliver aid. But do these changes make a difference? As of May 2015, about a year after its opening, less than 20% of Syrian refugees reside in formal camps, and Camp Azraq remains at low occupancy, hosting about 18,000 refugees, or roughly 14% of its intended capacity. If fully occupied, the camp could become Jordan's sixth most populous city. To better understand the implications of this new camp design, let's take a closer look at the camp itself and how it's different from earlier models. Located 76 kilometers from Amman and 31 kilometers from Azraq town, Camp Azraq spans over 15.5 square kilometers in a hilly desert prone to flooding. Paved roads and secondary roads connect 7 villages throughout the camp, only 2 of which, Village 3 and 6, are occupied. Discussions are underway to open Village 2 and 5 as well in the upcoming weeks. Each village includes access to decentralized services, including a supermarket, mosque, healthcare, child-friendly spaces, and schools. Within each village are blocks, plots, and metal shelter units. Residents share wash facilities and water taps with other families in these areas, but do not have access to electricity. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, and the Jordanian government designed the camp in this manner to curtail negative consequences seen in earlier camps, particularly Zaatari. According to 12 Camp Azraq employees that were interviewed for about an hour each, all of whom have varying years of experience, opinions, and roles in different international NGOs, spatial changes came principally at 3 scales: the site, village, and the shelter unit. At each of these scales, we can see that the story is about the initial intention, the physical manifestation of that idea, later unintended outcomes, and what we can learn from that experience. Let's take a closer look at what happened at each scale. First, at the site level, officials considered improving camp security. Zaatari faced many challenges with safety and illicit trafficking due to the camp's close proximity to existing communities. To prevent some of these safety challenges, Camp Azraq is situated relatively far from any other developed areas. As a result, the camp is safer. Employees report few instances of any security issues. But this distance limits the chances for social or economic permeability with the host community, ultimately limiting the chances to establish sustainable or long-term relationships with the Jordanian population. One interviewee describes it as, there are long-term thoughts, but no real long-term plans. Second, at the village level, officials focus on order, hygiene, and community. In Zaatari, refugees relocated their shelters to be closer to family or camp amenities. This disrupted the official camp formation. In response to this, the new layout in Camp Azraq decentralizes services and groups refugees by family or neighborhoods to reduce spatial hierarchies and promote greater personal accountability to each village. These efforts proved to be more successful than earlier models. Camp Azraq employees report that cleaning services for the water and sanitation facilities are not necessary because refugees take better care of public facilities when shared with familiar neighbors. However, on the other hand, the rigid layout limits room for personalization and the place feels very static and sterile. A worker at the camp notes, "Immediately when I go to Camp Azraq, I feel there is no life. It's far better set up than the Zaatari camp, but the social aspect doesn't exist." That's why people are reluctant to come. To have a daily life or semblance of normal life, you need an enabling environment. Third, at the unit level, officials focused on durability and non-commodification. They saw that tents did not withstand the harsh winter and summer climates in Zaatari, and noticed refugees would sell parts of their shelters illegally. Therefore, they constructed units that were more robust and fixed in place in Camp Azraq. Despite these improvements, refugees are still unsatisfied with their units. Constructed primarily out of interlocking steel frames, metal sheeting, and aluminum foam insulation, the unit becomes very hot in the summers. An assessment conducted by Reach International reveals that 90% of surveyed households were dissatisfied with the shelter's temperature in the summer. Similarly, one interviewee recounted that screwdrivers were not allowed to be one of the items that were sold in the supermarket. He says, "The fact that the shelter has this permanent and durable aspect makes it difficult to change the way it looks. Their participation in making their physical space their own is limited." In aggregate, these scalar changes lead to three larger thematic findings. First, spatial thinking is not in the humanitarian rhetoric, and there's a mismatch between the planning language used and the humanitarian aspirations they are meant to achieve. At this time, the camp is a mix of urban and suburban qualities. Housing sprawls over a rigid grid, but the camp currently does not have the public transportation, varied land use, or density to warrant this efficiency-oriented configuration. It is a highly unfriendly pedestrian landscape for a strictly pedestrian demographic. In the camp, we see lots of opportunities to improve the quality of life. Issues of privacy, cultural comfort, flooding, and lighting could all have spatial solutions. To make these changes, spatial thinking should be institutionalized in the humanitarian charter. Next, we have the issue of an unstable population, or what some humanitarians call the numbers game. Humanitarians debate about what the tipping point is in a population where life begins to happen organically, or the Zotterization of the camp. Funding for amenities and changes cannot happen without refugees present, but refugees do not want to stay in these camps if they do not see the amenities or potential for change. When Camp Azraq was planned, managers anticipated 2,000 refugees arriving to the camp on a daily basis. Today, we see that this is not the case. A stable population in the camp could allow for greater leadership opportunities for refugees and momentum for other developments. Population has changed drastically over the course of several months due to weather, cuts in urban programs such as food and healthcare, and government detentions in informal tented settlements. With this increase in population, it is critical that the possibility for change is communicated to the refugee and that they can be agents of that change. Finally, we have to realize that change needs to come from an institutional mindset. Each involved party acts rationally and sees the dualism in this situation, but collectively, this does not amount to a coherent vision for the future. We are starting to see steps in the right direction, but refugees are still a highly underrepresented voice in this discussion, at least on public English language platforms. We need to look at the institutions that contribute to this imbalance and see how new voices can be introduced within these formal processes. So, what can we take away from this video? Azraq is unfolding and has the bones to be something that's much better than earlier humanitarian response efforts, but it also has the foundation to fail. Everyone wants something better in this situation, but we need to find a common better among all players. To work toward a more sustainable solution, perhaps we need to start looking at camps through the lens of non-traditional players, the refugee, planner, and designer. Camp Azraq will likely continue to evolve over the years, and the contributions of these players could help push for a more durable outcome.